Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of State of Cybercrime. It's awesome to be here. My name is Matt Radalak. I'm one of our hosts.
I am David Gibson. I look like I'm the other host.
Unless you're an AI, right?
Well, don't joke about that, man. It's happening.
Well, let's get right into it today. We've got a lot of great stories to talk about, and we did really want to prioritize one of them that we're going to save for the very end because it seems like we just can't get enough of Salt Typhoon.
More Salt Typhoon, please.
Well, we'll jump into our usual segments today. We'll start off with some good news, as there is often some good things to say in cyber. And maybe, David, we can even take a minute and zoom out on 2025 and the trends in good news in 2025, if I could put you up to that.
Hello from Connecticut.
Let's get into it. David, I guess I got to ask, is there any good news?
I think there is. We've actually got a few different stories. The first one, yay, Interpol. 5,500 folks arrested, 400 million seized. This is an operation called Hachi 5. It was conducted with the help of enforcement in 40 countries, and they took down the so many people, mostly around Asia, that these hacking groups that were responsible for voice phishing, romance scams, business email compromise. It looks like another kind of big cooperation effort. And just one thing, I hadn't heard of GRIP before, but it looks like it's a global rapid intervention of payments and things like that, or that's iGrip, and then there's GRIP. There are some different programs that are allowing different, law enforcement from different countries to really react more quickly and cooperate. So it's working.
Yeah, and another instance of it working, Interpol's Operation Serengeti, targeting cyber criminals behind various ransomware, extortion, and fraud scams, was successful in the apprehension of over 1,000 suspects across 19 different African countries. This operation took place between September and the end of October of this year, and it was purported that more than $193 million was lost by over 35,000 victims worldwide. But since all these arrests, I think we got to say score one for the good guys yet again.
Yeah, go Interpol. And can't leave out the U.S. Department of Justice. They're flexing. They charged three of the administrators of Popeye Tools, which is a place where you can get credit card information, stolen, other, I guess dark web information, and they seized $283,000 in crypto, as well as all the domains. So another one for the good guys, and it did cause me to do some research on Popeye because I don't know if anybody has actually watched Popeye. Somebody reminded me that there was actually a movie of Popeye, but I actually used to watch the cartoon. And I asked myself, what's the association here? And I remembered that Popeye was big on eating spinach, like it gave him superpowers. And I was wondering, is this like product placement? Was this like, somebody was trying to the big spinach, try to get in the act there and promote spinach. And it turns out that it was kind of more serendipitous, but the US was promoting spinach consumption at the time because of a decimal error in a study that was done by 1870, which basically inflated the amount of iron it was supposed to have by like 10 or 100% or something like that. It was like they said, a helping of spinach was roughly equivalent to a small paperclip. So anyway, I learned a lot about that. Why it's relevant to cybersecurity, I have no idea. But
Yeah, but you're definitely not an AI. I can tell you that, David. And,
that maybe that's why it's relevant. Just to
and
prove
as we look back on the year,
it.
I think a lot about the show last year, and we talked about arrests of a handful of people. And I feel like one of the big things that's changed this year is there are being rings being taken down in Asia Pacific, in India, in the States, in the UK, in Europe, in Africa. There's large scale operations by police forces and justice departments to take down large scale cybercrime operations. And so I definitely would say that in 2024, if you did the cybercrime, you're going to do the time.
It starts to look that way. That's for sure.
Well, let's jump into our newest segment, AI Vey, which will surely leave you saying the same. And what is this whatnot thing we're talking about, David?
Well, this one is was disturbing, definitely. So there's the cyber news research team was conducting some OSINT operations, and one day they discovered a whole bunch. They called it a trove of personal data that was in a GCP bucket that was open to open publicly, which is of course one of the big concerns with cloud object storage, right? But this had passports, medical records, resumes, itineraries, tickets, all sorts of stuff. And it turns out that Whatnot, which is it's sort of a middleman. It's kind of in your supply chain. If you're building AI, it's kind of a component that helps you build AI chatbots much more quickly. According to the article, they were using that bucket to store data that people would upload to use in conjunction with the chat. And the bucket was publicly accessible. The thing that was really disturbing, though, is according to the article, it took over 2 months for Whatnot to actually fix the vulnerability after they'd been notified. So I think one of the things we're learning about AI is there are a lot of different components, and each one needs to be inspected and secured, and especially if you're outsourcing any of it.
Yeah, and if if you weren't scared about AI yet, a piece of investigative journalism from the BBC, it got me a little bit worked up. They used an AI generated voice clone of themselves and then called their bank and tricked their bank into authenticating them. So the bank was sent this investigative journalist banked with Santander. They called. They said, "Hey, we recognize the phone number you're dialing from. Please give us your verbal passcode." And she pressed play on the AI generated sound clip of her voice saying, "My voice is my passcode," and got the successful reply from Santander. Thank you for authenticating. And though this is just a proof of concept, I think it raises really significant concerns in the security world of voice recognition technology, as AI advances have already made it increasingly difficult to distinguish between the real ones and the clone ones. And at least this kind of multi-factor authentication was duped by the AI clone of this person's voice.
Makes you wonder what is real. And speaking of what is real, um, fake news apparently is another great use case for AI. It's being used to generate a lot of disinformation. There's an agency called the Social Design Agency that's in Moscow. They've been using AI now to generate and enhance videos and audio, as well as news websites that resemble actual news sites. They're even creating false fact-checking resources to fool the people that are trying to validate the story. And really, it's the intention is undermining the Olympics, or actually the 2020, yeah, the Paris Olympics and the French elections in 2024, U.S. presidential election, using a combination of all of these synthetic materials, videos, audios, fact checking, webs, news sites, things like that. So it's definitely enough to make me say AI Bay.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, let's jump into our next segment and talk about some of the most vulnerable vulnerabilities since the last time that we met. The first one I want to talk about is the one that Romcom is exploiting, and we're not talking about those cheesy Hallmark movies that you're going to have to watch during the holidays. Romcom is a Russian cybercrime group. They're also known as UAT Threat Actor 5647 or Storm 0978, also known as Tropical Scorpius, UAC 0180, or even UNC 2596. They've got a lot of names. And Romcom, they're using two vulnerabilities. One, CVE 2024-9680, which is a use after free vulnerability that sits in Firefox animation timelines, which is a capability in the Firefox developer tool suite that allows developers to work on animations and manipulate animations from directly within the browser. They're using that in conjunction with CVE 2024-49039, which is a vulnerability in the Windows task scheduler that allows for application container ransomware escape and privilege escalation. Now, what they're doing with it is targeting organizations and individuals across Europe and North America in order to deploy their backdoor malware without user interaction for snooping and privilege escalation and lateral movement purposes. However, both vulnerabilities were patched by both Mozilla and Microsoft in October and November, respectively. So, as long as you're applying the latest updates to your Windows PCs and to your Firefox browsers, you probably won't be falling victim to this. However, it's definitely, when I think about cyber criminals and what we usually see in terms of hackers kind of logging in versus just using exploits in order to get in, this is a pretty specific exploitation attempt with some known vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's interesting how they're chaining the vulnerabilities together to achieve their ends with just minimal user interaction at all. I think they just had to go
And
to a website, right?
yeah, and I'm curious how many people are still using Firefox. Like, I'd ask our audience, like, drop the name of your preferred browser in the chat. Like, you
Mm.
open up a new tab. What browser is it going to be today? Is it Chrome? Is it Edge? Is it Safari? What are some other ones? What do we got? Opera, Firefox.
Mhm.
I heard a bunch of Brave. I haven't even tried that one. Or Island, DuckDuckGo, uh,
Oh.
Brave. I have never used Brave. I'm gonna have to look that one up. I'm learning things. We got a lot of
If everybody, yeah, sorry, if everybody could also drop in their IP address, that would be really
yeah,
helpful as
social
well. And
security number,
yeah,
middle name, mother's maiden name, those types of things. That would probably be helpful. All right, yeah. Well, what's going on with Salt Typhoon? Because we've got a couple of stories about Salt Typhoon today.
yeah, it's I gotta say I just love another spider. And this is a beautiful image here. But this is a new backdoor. Obviously from the title you can see that, but it does exploit a lot of the vulnerabilities that we've talked about to get installed. Vulnerabilities we've talked about on the show with Fortinet, Sonic Firewall, Proxy Logon. That's an oldie but a goodie. Ivanti VPNs. What makes this backdoor a little scary is its stealth. It implants the beacon in memory, uses encrypted payloads. It's hiding the command and control in HTTP headers and cookies. And it's another weapon in the arsenal for Salt Typhoon to get into communications providers. So another stealthy backdoor that's being used to really, it seems like massive infiltration and persistence.
Yeah, and maybe just a part of that overall chain we're going to talk about in a few minutes with the surveillance of networks. Now, as our resident Unix Linux guru slash expert slash wizard, what's Bootkitty and why do we care?
So BootKitty is, surprise, a bootkit, and it exploits a vulnerability in UEFI, and the vulnerability is specifically in the image parser. Now, UEFI is the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, or I think about it as just BIOS 2.0. Somebody can correct me if I'm underselling it there, but it's much more flexible version of BIOS. And there's a vulnerability that's been named called logo fail. And the way this works is if you plant a malicious image on the file system, so it gets read during boot, like the logo image, then the vulnerability can be exploited with that malicious image. And what happens is it overwrites memory, and then you can bypass some of the secure boot options. You can essentially get control of the host that way. This actually, what was really interesting about this is that this project started out as a research project from some cybersecurity students in South Korea, I believe. But some of the versions of the exploit, uh, regrettably, looks like they got out, and now it may be in actual development. So it's really affecting mostly Linux systems at this point. So I'd recommend patching Linux systems if there is a patch for this for UEFI for your distribution. It also recommends using secure boot, and then of course physical access is pretty important. So I think you have to kind of be able to plant the image on the file system. So there's a little bit of a a barrier to entry here, but if you can get that far, it looks like you can take over the host pretty easily.
Let's jump on into our last segment, the danger zone, where we talk about some of the latest happenings from breaches, exploits, threat actors, and things you might want to be concerned about. And I think the headline story almost needs no introduction. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI, identified that the People's Republic of China and some affiliated cyber actors, mainly Salt Typhoon, have compromised the networks of multiple telecom companies and enabled all kinds of different stuff like surveilling communication across those networks. And they're issuing warnings about things like not using WhatsApp or SMS. um, and it really begs the question for me, like, is there any safe form of communication anymore? I know, David, you and I were talking a little bit about Apple's new message verification protocol and how that might be a good place for sending
Yeah.
messages. But I wonder about voice communication and video communication. I also think a lot about what what are they doing with all this data? This has got to be a massive, massive amount of information that they're siphoning out if they're tapping networks for a long time. um, what do you think that PRC is doing with all this stolen network data?
Well, I'm sure they're just trying to send us a holiday gift, you know,
It's certainly not to
trying to
steal
figure what.
intellectual property from like every company that's using those different networks, right? Or embed themselves by stealing root certificates and being able to decrypt things.
You know, it's I kind of wonder whether they're trying to see what people are saying about all the drones that they're flying over the eastern seaboard at the moment. No, I mean, this crazy big story is all stuff coming together. It's very scary when you think about all of the information that people can gather from this metadata, from who you're talking to, what they're saying. If you have the conversation, it's almost like, what can you plan? It's almost like getting to the point where the ability to predict actions at scale uh, could be pretty within reach.
Yeah, and thinking about like this kind of attack makes me think about that nearest neighbor Wi-Fi attack. Talking about surveilling networks. What's that all about?
Oh my God, this was pretty ingenious. But I guess we should have seen it coming. Generally, Wi-Fi's are kind of, Wi-Fi networks are have, with Cody's Kinsey, and Security Forward has talked about this a long time. Obviously there's a lot of vulnerabilities in Wi-Fi, especially if you're not using MFA there. But I think we've all kind of sort of realized or thought, well, you have to be in range of the Wi-Fi. And of course, Cody's also written about how the range can be a little bit further than you think. But it's not like it's going to cross an ocean. So, well, I guess Fancy Bear has figured out a way around that limitation. And the way it works is they compromise a multi-homed computer uh, near the Wi-Fi that they want to break into. So, basically, they don't have to sit next to the building to kind of get into the Wi-Fi. What they're doing is they compromise a host on a that's nearby the Wi-Fi that happens to be multi-homed. And I hadn't really thought about this, but yeah, if you've only got a single home host that only uses Wi-Fi, you can't break the Wi-Fi connection that you broke in on to go connect to another one. So the device has to have a hardwired Ethernet as well as a Wi-Fi connection or some other connection, right, that they can maintain while they connect to the victim's Wi-Fi. So, I've got one on my computer right now. So I've got a Wi-Fi network and I've got an Ethernet connection. So theoretically, it could connect to my computer, then fire up my Wi-Fi and connect to the victim's Wi-Fi network, especially if they have credentials which they've stolen or they break in using one of the other techniques. This technique was actually discovered. Um, a company really had a hard time figuring out how the heck are they in here? What are they? Because it's not really necessary. You don't have to leave a trace, but luckily they spotted in the wireless controller logs a MAC address that wasn't from their network. So where is this MAC address? They were able to discover that it was in a neighbor's a neighbor's building, a neighboring office building. And then once they traced that back, they discovered there was actually a second neighbor that had been compromised as well. So kind of deep persistence to get at this victim. So moral of the story, MFA on your Wi-Fi as well, but just don't count on physical proximity or physical, the physicality, the physical security to protect your Wi-Fi network because you've got neighbors as well that you got to worry about.
Wow. It's almost ingenious, right? Like they compromise one network and then they see what's around instead of just compromising exactly where they are. I thought
Yeah,
that was
just
pretty neat. Now, what's up with Sapphire Sleet and AI based scamming?
well, I really hope that this is in our good news segment at some point, but I'm not sure if that's going to be possible. Good luck, Interpol, and and all the other law enforcement agencies out there. This North Korean-based hacker group is really good at social engineering. They're using AI to create fake LinkedIn profiles for job recruiters and job seekers too, and essentially, they reach out via LinkedIn and then they try to set up an interview in, I guess it's probably a different online platform. I'm suspecting than Zoom or whatever. But whatever invite they send, it might be Zoom, I guess. But the invite when they try to connect to the interview, they get an error. And so they're a little bit panicked. You're trying to impress somebody on an interview. And so the victim reaches out, hey, I can't get in. And they say, well, let me get my admin on. And so they've got a tech support person that basically sends them an Apple script or a VBS file to help them log on. But of course, that's malware. And they've stolen about 10 million in crypto this way. So this is I hope this can get taken down.
Well, that's pretty much it, folks. As always, this show is made possible by you, our audience. We super appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. And as always, David, great job as a host, and happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays. Thank you so much, Matt.